does being a African American, how has that affected you in your career, if in any way?
In in many ways. Again, I would go back to some of the lessons learned, from high school. And
Mhm.
again, it probably was more of reality than the one that I was nurtured in, through grade school, where it was, common black faces and people, mostly of color. And, we had one or two, white kids that were there in grade school that were still in the neighborhood. But when you look at the work environment and the higher up that you get, and over a course of time might be better. We are trying to improve, but obviously there are no. I did a panel just to show you, and I had a brother that was trying to get 4 African American um, chief information security officers at
Mhm.
corporate, and he must have canvassed LinkedIn, and he said that he had gone through over 1,000 plus names in order for him to try to get just 2 people that he ended up getting. And so once he got to me, I said, yeah, there's a small nucleus of us and we know each other. So I gave him a sister that I knew, plus another brother, for us to make that particular panel. So if you think about my environments that I'm in, and I'll go back most recent, the past 8 years with Philips. Well, Royal Philips is a Netherlands Dutch based company,
Mhm.
and at the officer level, there was absolutely zero other people that looked like me.
And I think in their country, they don't have, like the way you said, where you grew up, you didn't have any experience with them. They didn't have any experience
They
with
they
us.
did, but it's kind of interesting because when you talk about diversity,
Hmm.
at least at that point in time, their definition of diversity was to put white females at
Yep.
a
Yep.
senior role,
Yep.
because male female is how they looked at diversity. Now,
Yep.
was there brothers that were, working in, that lived, grew up, and was in the Netherlands? Yep. But the
Mm.
high levels that I saw, they were working, traditionally in custodial and other areas within
Wow.
within the organization. But
Wow.
according to them, they would be appalled if you would have thought about how we look at what roles, what activities, what level of influence would someone have. So it is something that it plays on itself, and it's a trade that not only did I have to, over the course of my career, have to learn how to be the only person in the room, I needed to also learn how to be the only person that might even be within, in a new country, in a different room. The
Right.
room's still the same, but when you add that other dynamic that everybody in there is speaking Dutch, and
Man.
they could be calling you all sorts of things,
Man.
sitting there, and they will continue the conversation.
And then
So,
even because I was on the elevator with a guy I worked with. He spoke Spanish.
mhm,
He looked like you and me. His family
right,
was like Dominican or something.
yep,
And these two Mexican girls got on, and they were just talking away in Spanish. And then he said something to him in Spanish as we're exiting the elevator. I'm like, man, they were talking about us. He was like, well, they were talking about his shoes. They liked his shoes. So he was saying that, when you hear people, they're not always just calling you derogatory names, but
right,
they do be talking about you though. It
right.
just might not be negative. They could be saying, it's a nice suit this black guy has on. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's a trip, man. So, but on the flip side, though, also would we it's a subtlety of just being Black. If there's not a lot of us in that industry, we're missing those 6 degrees of separation too, that connectivity. So somebody might come from over there and work at your company, and yeah, that's, you know, that's Self Love's uncle. He's Dutch, and you know what I mean. And that means
Right.
something. That means something, and we don't have that if there's not a lot of us involved. Where you could say, "Hey, that's Mills. He's a beta noob." You know what I mean? If we're not
I
at the
know
table.
exactly. No, and again, that's why it's been so critical for me when I've gotten to a certain, experiences and levels, that I am a very staunch, when you see the organizations and some of the things that you named, and bringing other people and giving them opportunities that they never would have had, so that I can have now more of that nucleus of, hey, Mike Mack is over at, McKesson, and I knew him when we worked at Pitney, and someone that I'm now interviewing with, they'll give me a call and say, you know what, Todd is my man. He worked for me. I was at this one. I know what he did.
Track record. Yes.
Yes.
Right. And they can't say that about you if they're from the Netherlands and you're from the South Side of Chicago. It's going to be less people talking on your behalf like that, and that's just something why we need our own ownership, which, everybody knows. So I'm going to ask you one more and then see if there's something in the chat. Well, actually, they asked you that one. So that's a great one. Okay. When you were with Phillips, what were your duties and, any accomplishments while you were there?
Sure. I think that so my duties while I was there, if you can, and I'll tie into a little bit of some of the promo video discussion talking about the security of nanotechnology.
Yeah, the future. Yes, we want to talk to you about that. Yeah, so go ahead. Yeah, let's tie that in.
And again, it's kind of interesting when I knew all the characters that was at Palo Alto and the chick at Gartner and Fort.
Wow.
All of them I personally do know.
Wow.
So it was kind of interesting because they're a little bit still behind, I think, with the times. But so when I was at Phillips, and I kind of combined it as a combination with what I did and established with Medtronic as well. So these are medical device companies, and best way that I could present them would be when they develop and build that technology. So whether or not it was a pacemaker, and this is where your nanotechnology will come into big time play. In order for you to have your heart, and in order to update that pacemaker that's in your chest, or if you have Parkinson's disease, and you put the same kind of a pacemaker in your,
when the updates come in,
updated that device, I had the responsibility of making sure that as it was developed, that it was tested by, I had my own set of hackers. We call them white, kind of white hoodie, white hat.
Good guy hackers.
Right, because they were ethical hackers. That understand what the code was. I also had a team that had responsibility to go out on the dark web and to see what other information was going to be.
So they're ethical hackers on the dark web, kind of pretending to be dark hackers just so they can kind of find out what's going on out there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Again, let me just say this. In order for us to have the ability, when you talk about somebody from a career perspective, if you like, breaking into something or tearing up something or kind of, as they say, reverse engineering that solution, you got the right chops and at least the right DNA to go into.
Well, that's what's wrong with the police
cybersecurity.
department. If I reformed it, I'm sorry to cut you off. I hate when I do it, but that's the problem. I think they need to hire not informants, but they need to hire more ex-criminals and give them badges and call them. What? How did you call the hackers? Benefit hack? What did you call them? The good hackers. It's a term. Ethical hackers.
Ethical hackers.
Yeah, we can make these criminals ethical criminals, and because it takes a criminal to catch a criminal. But go ahead, back to your point.
No, so you are exactly correct. So I had a team of about 50 plus people. They would work with all of our different products and businesses in order to understand where the compromises would be in the solutions that we had. And then I would have other team members that, to your point, when an ethical hacker or someone out in the marketplace can demonstrate, look, I can get into your device and I can, automatically make that pacemaker, stop.
You'd rather have them work for you than get.
Or the other products that we dealt with was like your insulin pump.
Yeah.
For diabetes.
Yeah.
And so I could make you shoot an additional bolus of insulin that could immediately. So all of that was the type of ethical hackers that even when they didn't work for me, part of my team's job was to have an outreach and embrace them so that we could make sure that what they learned and could demonstrate was just something from an academic perspective, and it wasn't a major, attack or a threat.
Because had they did that, something like what you described, that would have been fatal for any company.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. I have worked with other organizations and been associated in the industry where some people, they go in, and this is where you get into the ransomware kind of a conversation, discussion. When someone wants to disrupt for profit, it's kind of one of the other clips I had sent you. I was at a conference, and was one of the, he's a great guy, one of my kind of mentors that was from the Dutch side.
Yeah.
Discussion with Jeroen Tass, and he opened up the conversation and made the statement, well, why does hackers and people like that, target banks? Because that's where the money is. and now when you talk about for healthcare and medical devices and products that are the lifeblood, why does someone want to target a hospital? Because if I hold that hospital ransom so that either I can, shut down the system, or I could force, certain patients to be diverted from that particular hospital.
Ethically, a hospital has to pay out. Ethically, especially if they can do harm to a patient. They all took oaths. So I look at it on the one hand, when they started that ransom, I'm like, those companies shouldn't pay. We're Americans. We don't negotiate with terrorists. But no, if they got you by the cojones and they got you by the, not just for money, like medical, that's ethical, bro.
Right. So what my responsibility was to take a look at all of that and manage it within the company. And so what I feel proudest or achievement was, I didn't just do it for the company. I did it so that we raised the bar for the industry. And so when you saw I testified before Congress and then some of the task force, it was to put in new types of law and legislation, and what the Federal Drug and Administrations, in order to do that, they call documentation of pre-market, which is when you're trying to submit something for FDA approval, as well as post-market surveillance guidance. And so the cybersecurity guidance didn't exist until I was a part of some of the leading elements within that. And just like we have our nicknames with, the frat and Stony and the rest. Yeah. So in cyberspace, they call me, at least of the other medical and the peers, I'm the Godfather.
That's a great suit too for the Godfather, man.
No doubt.
Yeah. I see that all day, man. Hey, Self, we probably would have called, if he was a noob in the 90s running around the house, that's probably